Alright, so in this video I'm bringing you a deck profile of my pure Kaiju deck. I think this is probably the best build of Kaijus I've made so far, and it's honestly pretty good. The main thing you do to beat people is you get to just like one of your floodgates bar trap cards, and then you protect it with a Kaiju, and then you just sit on that, and your opponent usually can't do anything, and like they can try to twin twister, but then if it's gamma cell, you just negate, and like yeah, there's not much that a lot of decks can do if you have the right floodgates for them. So a big part of this deck is also side decking. You have to side deck the proper floodgates to make sure you have the right ones for each respective matchup. So starting off with the monsters, I'm going to be going from highest attack to lowest attack. So you've got two Jizukuro. This is the best Kaiju. It has really high attack, and it also has a really good effect. Yeah, so this is one of the ones you can sit on. There's three different Kaijus with strong effects that you can sit on, and try to control the game with them. This, if it was any effect that targeted, and not just targeted one card, then it would be amazing. And you could just sit on this with a floodgate, and there'd be like nothing your opponent could do. But since it's only one, the fact that Twin Twister came out really hurts this card a lot, because this can't stop Twin Twister. They target two cards. So yeah, that's the main downside with this. But this can stop a lot, and it's really good in the Burning Abyss matchup, because you can stop their Dantes and Sears and all that stuff. And then two Dogoran. This is a good one to give your opponent because it doesn't have a quick effect. It's also pretty good because it has the good Regeki effect, which can sometimes come up. But that's not as irrelevant as you would think it is, really, because it can't attack the turn it does it. So it doesn't really help against pendulums. And that's really the only matchup where it comes up where you want to destroy their field. But yeah, this is a good one to give your opponent. Radian, same thing. Good one to give your opponent. The effect doesn't really come up very often, but this has the lowest attack out of the two that don't have effects, really. And then one Humongous. This is another one you can try to sit on because it's got a pretty good effect. This one's very matchup dependent on how good it is, but against certain matchups it's really good. And then Gamma Seal. This is the best one to sit on because if you have this plus a Floodgate, your opponent pretty much can't do anything. They have to be able to summon something without using an effect to get over this that like isn't stopped by your floodgates, and usually your floodgates will stop them from summoning something that can get over this. And that's it for the Kaijus. I'm not running very many Kaijus because if you have too many, you tend to draw them a lot, and you don't want to draw them like at all almost. You want to draw like maybe one because you need something to get started. But after you get your Waterfront and your Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, you just search or summon them off from the deck, and you do not want to draw them. So yeah, not very many Kaijus. And then for the non-Kaiju monsters, we've got one new Spatial Grand Mall. I really wish this was at 3. I would totally play 3 in here. It's actually extremely good to just put one of these Kaijus down on your opponent's side of the field, and then summon one of these ones to your side of the field, and then bounce the one you gave to them back to your hand, and then you have a Kaiju and they don't. And I mean, you can do that every turn, just as monster removal. And even without having that, this is still decent monster removal for like extra deck monsters. And it's one of the few good normal summons in here. I don't really like Gradles. They're super slow, and they're easy to play around with the Abyss Dweller and all that junk. And then 2 Card D. I think this is decent in here. You play a decent number of traps, and your monsters function a lot like traps also. So, giving up your battle phase isn't too big of a deal. This puts a counter on Waterfront, helps speed through your deck to get to your combo pieces. Yeah, I don't really think there's a better option at the moment. And then for spells, triple Waterfront, triple Terraforming, because you really need to get to your Waterfront as soon as possible. Even if you end up having multiples with all of these copies, you can pitch dead copies in your hand for cards that I'm going to show you later in the deck profile. And yeah, I mean, even if you get both of them at the same time, Terraforming puts a counter on this. And this field spell is so good. It does everything for you. It searches your deck for your monsters. It gives your monsters their effects, and it also protects itself. So it's really hard for your opponent to deal with it. And then I'm playing Triple Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. I don't like drawing multiples of this because this dead card becomes super dead late game. You run out of Kaijus in your deck really fast. But I think you need to play 3 to try to draw it early. Because you really do need this a lot of times to break established fields. And you do want to draw that first copy. And then usually the second and third copies are dead. So you could consider going down to 2, possibly. I think that might be a decent option. Especially now that they hit Pepe. You really needed 3 of this. I was also playing 1 Regeki in addition to that. Just, you need all that to try to counter their first turn boards where they would go all in. But that's not as needed anymore. But this is still good at breaking up boards, which will still be relevant, I think, in the next format. Triple Upstart Goblin, because you need consistency. I really think it's necessary in this deck to try to get to your combo pieces. So yeah, I think that's pretty important. Triple Twin Twister. This is one of your main discard outlets, and you do end up with extra dead cards a lot in this deck, so discard outlets are good, especially if you can make use of them productively, and Twin Twisters is amazing at getting rid of back row and floodgates and all that stuff. This is good against every matchup except for possibly Cosmo, depending on how much traps / floodgates they're running. But like, even Monarchs, they don't play traps, but they still play continuous spells, so you can just hit those, and this is obviously good against pendulums. So yeah, I really like Twin Twister. And then the last spell, first Floodgate, 2 Kaiser Coliseum. You only really have 1 monster on the field at a time. The only time you have more than 1 is this, but you just put this back in your hand. So Kaiser Coliseum is really strong in this deck. And this shuts down anything that's extra deck based or pendulum based. This is actually extremely important against pendulum decks because they can just keep summoning their monsters back in defense mode if you don't have something like this. With this, they can only summon 1 monster per turn, which is a lot easier to deal with. You can either Grand Mole it back to their hand, or you can just tribute it off for a Kaiju. But if they are pendulum summoning a full field, then you don't really have a way to deal with that. That's actually not as big of an issue as it sounds, because you can deck them out. I actually beat a Pepe player by decking him out. I was sitting on a different Floodgate, which I'll get to later, plus a Humongous. And yeah, he probably should have scooped, because he didn't have any outs to that field in his entire deck. But yeah, I don't know why he didn't scoop to save time, but it's like 35-minute deck out. It was pretty funny. So traps, I got triple remove brainwashing. This is really critical because this is the best way to get your Kaijus back when you put them on your opponent's side of the field. The only downside is it's continuous, so this is like super bait for Twin Twister, which this deck is somewhat weak to. I don't really think there's any way around that. You can protect yourself somewhat because of Gameciel and another card, which you'll see later in the deck profile. I've hinted at this one a few times. I think it's super critical, actually. But anyways, this is really key because if you're sitting on a Kaiju and your opponent is summoning monsters in defense mode to try to stall, you can just summon something to your opponent's side of the field, have it come back, die, and then you have a free field and you can just attack. And I think that comes up a lot, so it makes for any Kaiju to basically be monster removal, which is great. Double Call the Haunted. I think this is pretty important because it reuses your Kaijus. You have a low monster count, so reusing your Kaijus is pretty important if they get killed. I think there is an argument for Oasis because it summons this in defense mode, but every other one basically has high attack. So, yeah, I'm still not sold on this over Oasis, but I think you need to run at least one of the two. Next Floodgate, this is what I was sitting on. Lose a turn. So lose a turn is really good against basically everything except for monarchs. And I think you need to play 2 just because it's good against everything else. It's good against Cosmo. It's good against Pendulum stuff. So I was sitting on that and this against the Pendulum guy. It was just this. This is my board. And they couldn't do anything. Every time they tried to summon an Xseed that could like try to live a turn because I couldn't attack over it, and then the next turn they would kill me, then I just had I had to remove brainwashing also. So I would just summon a Kaiju on their side of the field that would die, and they couldn't get to any outs because they weren't playing Twin Twister in the main deck, which a surprising number of people do not main deck Twin Twister, in my experience at least. So this and other floodgates are a lot more relevant game 1 than they would be if they main deck Twin Twister, which I really think you should in almost everything. And then I hinted at this card earlier, playing 2 Cursed Seal the Forbidden Spell in the main deck. I think that as long as you're playing enough spell cards, every single deck should main deck this. At least like 13 or 14 spells, I think, is needed to support this because you do need to have a lot of spell cards. But this card is good against every single deck in the meta right now. I'm playing 17 spells myself, and I do dead draw a lot of them, as I was talking about earlier. So I think this is a perfect choice in a Kaiju deck to play. Against Pendulums, obviously you hit their best Pendulum spell, and then they can't use it anymore. This isn't quite as relevant as it used to be, because before I was using this against monkey boards, which is hilarious. But you can still use it against like a Wisdom Eye Magician, which is really good. And if you're playing against a non-pendulum deck, this is extremely good against monarchs because they have a lot of 3 of spells that they want. Tenacity really hurts. Pantheism really hurts. Stormforth really hurts. This deck, I don't really care about the field spell, but if you are playing a deck that does, you can hit that with this. So they have a lot of continuous stuff. Against Cosmos, the main thing is Cosmo Town. If they don't have that up, that hurts them a lot. And then you can also hit Emergency Teleport. And if, like against Infernoids, you can hit Reasoning. There's just so many things. And I haven't even gotten to the main reason that I'm main decking this, which is Twin Twister. If you hit Twin Twister with this, and your opponent has no good answers to your floodgates. And, I mean, if you're sitting on this plus a floodgate, plus a Kaiju, you're really sitting pretty. There's not very much your opponent can do, because as soon as they Twin Twister, you just, bam, you can't use Twin Twister anymore. And it's huge. And then finishing out my trap lineup, I've got 1 Solemn Strike, 1 Solemn Warning, and 1 Vanity's Emptiness. All really good traps right now. I would be playing 2 Solemn Strikes if I had to. I would cut 1 card D. I don't think you should probably play 3. I think 2, 1, and 1 would be optimal. It's good to have a little bit of trap support for your Kaijus, but you don't really need too much because they kind of protect themselves to some extent. I am playing no extra deck. That was a conscious choice because you can kind of trick people into thinking that you're playing Monarchs, which is a slight strategic advantage, and it's almost impossible to make anything in the extra deck. Like, the easiest way is if your opponent is playing Skill Drain and you have removed Brainwashing, but then you're just sitting on 2 big beat sticks, so why would you give them up for an Xseed? So it really doesn't make sense to ever go into that extra deck with this build, so I'm just not playing one. And then for the side deck, triple Max C. I feel like Max C isn't quite as good right now, especially if Magicians catch on. I don't think this is very good against Magicians. But it's still a good card in a lot of matchups. I think it's definitely worth citing that at max. 2 Book of Eclipse. This is mostly for Vanity's Fiend. This deck really loses hard to Vanity's Fiend, and Monarchs can easily play that. This gets around March of the Monarchs, so I like it. It's also decent against established boards in general, because it addresses everything, obviously. I also like this because you can put your own Kaijus face down, and then you can summon more than one, which is nifty. It's just an extra little bit of utility built into it. Then 1 Regeki, same thing. This is not the Vanity's Fiend. And this is also just generally good in a few matchups. And then after that is all the floodgates that I was talking about. These are the stuff you want to side in, because if you can protect them, then you win, basically. Triple anti-spell fragrance. You can't really main deck this anymore because Cosmos and Monarchs are probably going to be the two most popular decks, but Magicians and possibly even Pepe are still going to be popular. I could see Performa Pals. I guess that's just Pe, because they lost the second one with the Performage, but Performa Pals could still be hanging around. I could see them working out a build. But especially with Magicians, this is a relevant card to side deck. And that next, triple Mask of Restrict. Okay, so I thought I had 3. I only had 1, so I've got 2 coming. I don't have them right now, though. I think you definitely need 3. So I do need to address the fact that Mask of Restrict shuts down your own plays. If you have a Kaiju in your hand, you can't tribute to summon them if Mask of Restrict is on the field. The thing is, if you can summon a Gamma Seal or something like that, and you activate Mask of Restrict against Monarchs, you win. There's nothing they can do. If they get any of their answers to the Floodgate Mask of Restrict, you negate it with Gamma Seal, and they can't make any plays, and you win. And that's so easy to do, because any Kaiju you can easily get to with a consistency in the deck, searching through Waterfront and then special summoning with Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. So basically, it comes down to draw Mask of Restrict, and then you just have to try to get your monster on the field, and then you just win. And it's just such an easy win condition against one of the most popular decks. I think you basically have to do it. And then 2 Imperial Iron Wall. This is your floodgate of choice for Cosmo, and also for the Rogue Infernoids. Yeah, pretty straightforward. And then the last one, super obvious floodgate, the last lose a turn, because there are a lot of matchups where this is really good. And yeah, you want 3 of this against most things that aren't Monarchs. So that was my Kaiju deck profile. I feel like it's pretty good. I might put it aside for now because I kind of want to work on making the Quantum Rangers deck, because I'm a big fan of Power Rangers. I did have an idea that I want to try, but I'm going to put on hold, trying like a tribute stun engine with like Vanity's Fiend alongside the Kaijus, because any of the lockdown Kaijus plus a Vanity's Fiend is really good, obviously. So that's an idea if any of you guys want to try that out. But I do know that this current build works well, so if you guys want to try it out, I would recommend it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to check out some other stuff.